Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unstoppable Futures. I'm here with Johan and Jeremy from Span Advocacy in New Jersey, and they're going to help me talk about the topic self-advocacy. So first, let's do some introductions. Hi, Johan. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me. And my name is Johan Verde. I'm the Youth Engagement Manager at the Span Parent Advocacy Network. I am also a project coordinator for one of our regional, which means Span is a parent center. And we help other parent centers in what we call Region A provide support like we do at the state level to families, to communities, and those who are looking to connect with their special education, human, and health services. So we are there and involved.
And next, we have Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Nathan, thanks for having me. So, hello, my name is Jeremy Hay. I'm a youth engagement coordinator with Span Parent Advocacy Network, and I've been a part of the youth engagement team alongside Johan for about a year, and I'm really excited to be here.
First question I have is, what is self-advocacy?
Yeah, I could go ahead and start off. Here at Self-Advocacy, we do a lot of teaching on the very word itself, right? So it means to use your voice, to speak up. But we do a lot of workshops and trainings on self-advocacy in schools, self-advocacy in the transition to adulthood, and in every single stage of your life. Even when you get older, you advocate for maybe a new job, or you advocate for at your education at your college. But overall, it's using your voice to get what you need, ask for what you want, and share your interests with others.
Yeah.
And to kind of just piggyback off of that, really, at least to me, self-advocacy has always been a way of understanding yourself and the world around you. And I think in terms of understanding yourself, it's about understanding your needs, whatever they may be. It could be something like if you're taking a test at school, then maybe you might just need some extra time just because you're not good at taking tests in a confined space. And then you recognize, okay, that's a need that I have. And then the next step is talking with someone who can help you facilitate that. So that would be a teacher, parent, maybe a friend, or whatever the situation allows. And really, just by doing that very minor kind of thing of finding out that you have an issue and then working on the ways to resolve that issue, that is self-advocacy in a nutshell. And that's really the core of what we of what we do with our youth engagement work, as well as other projects at Span.
Yeah. So, like you said, Jeremy, self-advocacy is to best know yourself and really also know what you want and also like understand your rights too. And with self-advocacy is not just like advocating for yourself; it also can be for others too. So, what are some advice you would give to someone wanting to officially advocate for themselves and others?
That's a good question. I guess for me, if I had to give advice to someone, I guess it would be to be patient. I think what happens a lot with, especially with like, younger people, like, middle school going into high school age, when we kind of like begin to talk about self-advocacy with them, they're really intrigued because it really because for them, that's like, okay, I have a voice. I can use my voice to actually help me get the things that I need to get accommodations and all these other things. And that's great. But then what happens a lot of times is that they kind of expect it to be almost like instantaneous. And when it doesn't immediately happen, they feel that they're not being listened to. But the reality is that um, people are willing to listen to you. They are willing to acknowledge the situation that you're in. But depending on what that situation might be, it might take some time. And I'm not talking it would take a very long time, but maybe instead of taking a day, it just takes a week, or it might take a month. And if you are curious about that, or if you just don't understand why it would take that long, then really just continuing to have a discussion with a parent or teacher, or even like principal or anyone else that's connected to the issue that you're facing, just having a discussion with them and finding out exactly what's going on. That's usually the best step. So for me, just be patient and also be willing to listen to what others have to say about the situation.
I agree. I think listening to others and being patient is a big part. As someone like myself who is formerly undocumented, I also was a DACA recipient, which means I had a work permit in this country, but I wasn't a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen. You start to learn a little bit more about what those challenges are in your life, and you start to take apart the opportunities that are not meant for you. And that perspective, those life lessons that I've learned, I've taken it with me everywhere. But I'm also a sibling to individuals with disabilities. I'm also an uncle and a nephew to individuals with disabilities. And first gen, which means both my parents only spoke one language at home, and I was off learning another language in schools. All that to say is that if somebody came to ask me, what advice would I give them to use their voice, is just be comfortable with sharing your story. The opportunities you don't have, a lot of other people don't have as well. And we need to sort of be able to build our own stories, share our disabilities, share our limits, share the life experience that really for many others is a lesson, in order to do so. So if you're thinking about self-advocacy and you're thinking, no one has it as difficult as me, or I don't know how to start, or where do I go? Listen to everyone's stories and build your own, and be ready to share. Because once you're ready to share about yourself, about your story, about your challenges, you start as sooner inspiring others as well to do the same.
Yeah. And I also like to add too is not a lot of people are comfortable speaking up on the first time you do it. And you maybe are comfortable speaking to new groups of people, but you may have a small group of people or friends or family that you do feel comfortable, and you can always start there to speak up on your interest, just to start a conversation, or like we're doing here, like we're doing a podcast and we're all comfortable talking to each other. So this is actually practice to something bigger, so we can speak up on behalf of ourselves or others in bigger situations too. So practice, right? And start in the smaller groups too, or even just talk to yourself in front of a mirror too, right? I remember when I was in school and they had to do a presentation, the teacher always said to practice, you can even mirror so you have some kind of audience too. So advocating for yourself is not a skill that we're all born with, and we have to teach ourselves. And schools don't really teach us how to advocate. But what are some things or other resources that young adults can use to help them learn how to advocate?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we have a few things at SPAN that we actually would definitely recommend. We have our YouTube channel, so the SPAN Parent Advocacy YouTube channel. We have a playlist there called Amplify Advocacy, focused solely on this, on individuals who have either shared their stories in the past or it's their first time. It's always an individual who is sharing a more sensitive part of their story, whether it's their disability, whether it's their life experience as a professional in the family special education advocacy world. And then outside of that, we have the Youth in the Know at SPAN, which is a webpage where we have our other programs, and there's a SPAN Youth Hub, a blog post that focuses on advocacy topics on a weekly basis, and other topics of that as well. We also have a family guide to transition, which is New Jersey specific, but a lot of it in it is all about the transition process, right? What that looks like. So if you're a child or a student with an IEP, which means you have a plan at your school with a team, because you identify with a disability, it means that you actually have this written down. You have goals to work to towards the school year. But outside of that, Nathan, I completely agree. School doesn't necessarily prepare you for something like self-advocacy, what to do after, but it does have those networks that you tend to grow with you, right? You have your friends, you have your parents, you have a guidance counselor. Outside of that, if you do have an IEP, you have a team that's there to support you. And those are resources. So I think it's important for people to realize that you can find tools online. You can go to iamdetermined.org, which has a whole toolkit. Charting the Life course, which you can break down your interests and your visions and your goals, just to name a few. But you also have your family. You also have your friends. You also have a guidance counselor. You also may have a social worker. And these are people you want to reach out to and start these conversations. Just like you said, you can start in the mirror. I was taught before that to start sharing my short story, I should start writing it down, right? So I did that. I created
Good.
my own personal blog post. And you can do things like that. But, look at the resources at home and then start to look at them online, like the ones that just shared.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of resources, Johan, I think you named off just about everyone that I could think of. So I guess I'll just go towards more like looking at what helped me personally. So when it came to sharing my story and discussing, how I grew up with an autistic brother and how also how like that affected me and my sister and my whole family, I found that whenever people asked me to tell my story about that, initially it was scary, just to kind of put it bluntly. And that's okay. As I've come to realize, it's perfectly okay to be at least like a little bit unnerved, especially if it's the first time sharing a sensitive story, being to family or something else that you don't normally talk about. But always just remember that as scared as you are, there's always someone else who's going through a similar experience, just like you. I mean, when I was younger, I thought no one understands what I'm going through because, all the resources, all the topics, all the stories I was seeing, they were always about the individual with disabilities and not their siblings. But as I've come to just get more involved in this community and also getting, involved in SPAN, I've come to realize that there's thousands, if not more, stories of people just like me who grew up in situations worse than mine. And reading about their stories and even meeting some of these people in person, it gave me a whole new perspective. So really, if people are still uncomfortable with sharing their story, just remember that there are others out there, and that while you do have, you of course you always have your support network, like Johan said, comprising of your friends and your family, but there's also a ton of people out there that can relate to what you're going through, whatever it might be.
Yeah, those are all great tips. And I hear a common word here that we all use and is network and connect with others. We already have the small group of people. I think what you said too, Johan, about writing it down, and you started like your own blog, but even just write a journal what you want to say and write things down and help get things out better, and you can see it clearly too.
I agree. Yeah, and sometimes, especially if you're a person who is nonverbal, a person who's visually impaired, a person who uses assistive technology, a person who English is a second language, sometimes the most comfortable way for you to share is within yourself. So journaling or using a computer or using an assistive technology device like TalkBack or Dragon, these are things that are available and people should be using it.
Yeah.
And we do our workshops and training. So we have a training at SPAN that we call student-led IEPs. And the whole point of that is that if you're a student with an IEP, which means it's an individualized education plan, it is for students under the IDEA, which is the law that says if you are an individual with disability, you have the right to an appropriate public education that is accessible to you, right? And that's just me saying briefly, I'm not reading off the law, but the law is meant that if individual with disabilities have the right to the same equal access to education as we all do, for those who you call more typical students who don't require. Because if you are self-advocating in schools, or you're looking on how to self-advocate or how to approach that, if you do have an IEP or you're an individual with disability, you're entitled, eligible to accommodations, right? And Jeremy mentioned this earlier, right? For example, you can ask for more time on a test if that means that that'll help you pass. You can ask for one-on-one attention if that means that you get that individual attention to go through a class. If you are a wheelchair user and you need more time to get to your next course, right, or your next class, you may need that extra 20 minutes, which means you come late into each class, but for you, you're actually on time. But now if you're a student who, let's say for myself, I didn't identify with disability at school, but I was formerly undocumented, as I said, and I was undocumented till I was at the age of 17, which means when I would ask, there were programs, after school programs that I couldn't sign up for because I didn't have a social security number. The way I did it is I had to be vulnerable to share my story and tell a teacher about my story, and then ask them plainly, right? A teacher, a guidance counselor, whoever is your support system at school, find one, and let them know what I needed. I needed an after school program where I could stay for 2 hours because there was no one who could pick me up from school. So I ended up joining a lot of sports, as you can imagine, because there weren't a lot of after school programs that were funded and open and free at the time. So I was a swimmer, I was in track, I did tennis, you name it, soccer, but only because I used my voice in school. So you do have to get comfortable. You do have to be vulnerable. If you are a student without disability, you don't necessarily have the same let's say, eligibility in order to ask for more time in a test, but that doesn't mean you can't do it, right? That's the whole point. You got to take that first step and do it by finding who you can trust in school. Depend on your parents or your guardians or a sibling. Don't do it alone, but it does take more effort depending on where you are on that side of the coin.
Yeah. I guess if I can put anything else there, it's just that there is someone qualified to be your support network at school, and that's usually in the form of a guidance counselor. But teachers can be very helpful if you are willing to share stories. Of course, not everyone's the same, and you might run into a teacher that might not be as understanding of your situation or of the accommodations you need as others. But usually, at least in my experience, when I needed to find help in dealing with a bully problem at my school, I initially just tried to, like John said, I tried to go it alone. Terrible idea, because going it alone hadn't worked for me before. So why should anything change there? What I found was that I had to I had to go to a couple of teachers, and then I realized that okay, this is a good start, but they could only do so much. And then eventually I went to my guidance counselor, who I legitimately didn't even know we had a guidance counselor. So that says a lot about me. But when I went to her and I told her my story, unlike the teachers who kind of just took it at face value and kind of were like, okay, we'll deal with it, she actually, like, we talked for, I think, an hour, like the first time I met her, about everything that was happening to me, everything that was happening to me, everything that was my relationship with this kid that was harassing me, if they were harassing other people, how long it had been going on for. And what made me feel better about the whole situation was even before any disciplinary action was taken, even before anyone was involved, it was just hearing someone care and noticing that someone was willing to hear what you have to say and try and formulate a solution with you involved. And that just did everything for me. I was like, okay, now I feel that this problem can be solved, and I didn't have to do anything crazy to do it. I just had to literally talk to somebody. So that's that's really what I'm trying to get at here, is that you should always try to reach out to people. And if the first person you reach out to is unwilling or unable to really help you, along your journey, just find somebody else, because there's always somebody else. There's always somebody else.
Yeah.
Even if they seem like they wouldn't be a good choice, it never hurts to ask. It never hurts to let someone know what's going on. Obviously, don't pour your heart out to literally everybody you meet. That's not really a good idea. But once you form a relationship with somebody and you're comfortable enough to share away. But you should always just be the first person to reach out.
Yeah, agreed. And I also like to add is that when you're in school like K to 12, it's a little easier to speak up because you have your parents or your guardian and teachers, and if they notice something going on too, they'll come up to you and ask, and the teachers and everyone wants to see you succeed. But when you get to college, a lot of times those teachers and parents,
Right.
guidance, your parents or guardian are not with you at college, and teachers or professors, you only see them once a week, maybe twice a week, it depends on your class schedule. So it's now it's up to you to go speak to the professor, or colleges have student success center or
Right.
was it accommodation center or something with disabilities or whatever that you go that those places won't come find you. You have to go find them.
Right.
And it's the different names depending on the college, and then you tell them what your accommodations are, and then they help you find the right ones, and then usually they give you a piece of paper that you give to your professors too.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Exactly.
practicing early to advocate is
Hmm.
important even when at a young age. And if you do have an IEP or a 504, for those parents and professionals too, is include your child in the meetings.
Yeah.
Even for like 15 or 20 minutes or a half hour, because they can see what's going on, they can hear about it. And sometimes your child will actually tell you if something's working, something's not working, or they may have a better idea that you come up with. So,
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And
yeah.
that's going to be everywhere in life, either
Yeah.
at school, at work, at college, or at the doctor's office. Absolutely true.
Also, one of the things I want to give is like when you do advocate for yourself or speak up for yourself or others, like stay calm and be respectful too. And,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Doesn't cost anything to respect another human being.
yeah. So social media, right, is a big part of our lives, and because everyone's connected 24/7, and there's a lot of information out there that could be true, could not be true. With everything out there on social media, what's the best way to make sure it's like a trusted source? Well, how do we know that's a trusted source too?
I would say when it comes to making sure that you're getting the most accurate information, there's not there's not one place that like you can put a story in and it'll tell you, okay, this story is 100% true or it's false or anything else like that. Really, it comes down to your own due diligence and how much
Mm.
research you're willing to do, especially for more complex stories. And this is especially true now when it's so easy for people to spread misinformation about just about everything. Really, you have to be your own researcher. And that's the way to do that is just to, if you see a story or you see a topic, find not just one source, but find several sources. If it's something that's like political, then find sources from both sides of the aisle. If it's something that's talking more about nature, try to look at government pages, look at like professional journals from doctors and researchers and things such as that. And just if you see a lot of information is all kind of connecting and it's all kind of like referencing each other, then more often than not, that is, I hesitate to use the word correct because there's always more that could be changed, but that's how you normally find the most accurate information on a story. Usually and also, let me just segue into this. If you see something that sounds like really crazy, like the world is going to like end in like 2 days because of polar ice caps or something, usually if it's like really sensationalist like that, it's usually like not true in the slightest. And, while you can determine that for yourself, it is also good to find pieces, whether they're online or in print, and to just kind of find information that debunks that false information and to get what the real story is. I will say it's not easy. It's actually very difficult, especially like now, depending on what social media site you're on, YouTube,
Mm.
Facebook, TikTok, things such as that. And even for the blog that Johan mentioned, whenever I'm writing a blog post, I have to find, a YouTube video or some kind of interactive media or something that's relating to the topic at hand. And there's times where just doing research alone will take me well over half an hour. And then there's other times
Yeah.
where it takes me just 5 minutes. And the reason why it's so important to get get your information correct is so that when someone else asks you about the story, like, hey, did you hear about this new thing or this new piece of tech or this new thing developing across the world? You don't want to be someone that's spouting out information that you saw on Facebook from one person, because while you might not realize it, you are spreading misinformation. You're not doing it intentionally, but you just didn't, because you didn't find the real source and you're just going off of the first thing that you heard. Now you're just telling the other person exactly the information that you heard. And that other person might not want to do any kind of due diligence. They might just believe you on what you're saying, and then it just spreads like wildfire. So really just do your due diligence, just do as much research as you can, and just make sure to always check on stories, especially stories and topics that are just happening as you're looking into them, because information that might be completely accurate one day might be completely outdated 3 days later. So it's always just keep on top of everything.
A lot of the information that we get, everyone gets it differently nowadays. I mean, you either get it through a social media app, you either are actually reading the news, or you're really, traditional is the best word to use. You sit down and watch the news, right? So it's so different when it comes to each generation. But I always say misinformation is just a lack of information, and just stay curious. I mean, don't take anything at a blank statement. If I were to say, this year was the most hurricanes the United States ever experienced, like, be curious if someone says that to you. Be curious if you read that on the Facebook post. Be curious if you even hear it in the news. And just as Jeremy said, do your research. There's a website out there that I like to use a lot just for the sake of pop culture, called snoops.com. And what it really does is that it does that, right? Like, there's a one of, will the SpaceX program, like, how long has that been created? Is it true Elon Musk is the only owner, et cetera, things like that. And then you go on a website like that and it's like, no, he's not the only owner. It's owned by this, it's budgeted by that, it's funded. So just always remain curious, right? I mean, in the world where we have the entire world at our fingertips, whether we're scrolling, typing, or speaking to an AI, fact check yourself. I mean, like Jeremy said, he's doing research on a blog post, not because he feels it's just something that you always have to do for the sake of writing a blog post, but he knows if he doesn't do this research and he sends that information out there, there might be people that are like, oh, the only way you can, do self-care is through exercise. And it's like, no, like he added like you said, he added a video, he added different ways, read a book, meditate. So keep your mind open. Nothing's a blank statement anymore. And just hashtag stay curious. Use that at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And something else I'll quickly tack on to is, I guess, in our parents' generation, it was kind of assumed that if the information you were hearing about came from someone with a title like doctor or professor or captain or something like that, it was kind of assumed that information was airtight because it's coming from a professional. So of course it has to be correct. While that's never really been, airtight, I think in recent years we've kind of come to realize that these people in high positions of authority and people with who've gone to school and all this, no one's perfect, and even those folks can make mistakes. So just making sure that like I said before, that you're doing your own research. That's probably the best way to get accurate information.
Yeah, because also, with everything being online too, and with information being so quick, even news outlets or professionals can get things wrong too, and they
Right.
always have to fact check themselves and always keep up too. So we may see something 1 minute, and then the next minute it's completely wrong because they got misinformation or misheard something. So we're in what's the word I say? An ever-changing world or something like that. So I guess the key thing is to always stay informed and use like Google or other means too to always keep up and with what's going on and with the world and wherever you want to advocate for yourself or others, right? And know your rights or just help you stay educated too.
Absolutely. It depends on the source. Like, the law is the law. So
Mm-hmm.
if
Yeah.
someone tells you the law isn't the law, you have to be like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, that's not how it happens. So learn about the processes as well, before sticking on one thing.
All right. So before we end today, Johan, gentlemen, is there anything else you would like to share with us, either about advocacy or what you guys are doing, or any resources or anything you'd like to mention?
So what I would say is take advantage of the resources that we're sharing. They've been created, they've been developed by a lot of individuals who either are, no one's road is the same. Their challenges are something that you can relate to, right? It's individuals who are either coping with the fact that they are, not as privileged or maybe undocumented individuals who are figuring out what life looks for them with a disability, whether it's someone who things are not always as accessible, or self-advocating for them is not necessarily a choice, but something that they have to do. These resources, these stories, the YouTube playlist, the webpage, the conversation on transition is never ending. And we're
Mm.
always looking for voices to be added. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I have a story, I want to practice, reach out to SPAN. We can either be contacted via our website, spanadvocacy.org, or you can contact us. At the bottom of our homepage is our email, our number. Although we are New Jersey specific, transition is a universal language. It happens
Yeah.
every day in every part of our lives, whether it's to adulthood, whether it's to becoming a senior, whether it's to becoming a parent, whether it's to start a family. We are always transitioning. So just remember, you're not alone. Take advantage of our resources. And we hope to be there and connect. And thank you for listening to me. And I'll pass it along to Jeremy now if he has anything he can add to that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, I'm going to back up like everything Johan just said there. We do have plenty of resources that have been, they've been vetted. They've been created by not only us, but also members of our staff, and actually quite a lot of information, especially relating to more personal stories. They've come to us from youth that have reached out to us. So there's a lot of people, like yourself, whoever you may be, who they've had their own story to share, or they've just had some resource or topic that they thought we'd be interested in, and they've reached out to us. And at least in terms of the blog, more often than not, information, it makes its way into something that goes out to literally hundreds of people. We have our Amplify Advocacy series that we covered before, where that's just us talking to youth around the country, really, who have felt comfortable sharing their own stories. And to kind of I guess before we go, I just wanted to say that if you are uncomfortable with speaking up, whether it's through sharing your story or it's through trying to get accommodation for yourself at school or work, or if you're thinking, okay, I want to say something, but is it really that important? Oh, maybe I shouldn't say anything. I guess like a way I can kind of make this a bit more relatable is there was a really bad pothole that always messed up every car that drove on it. And when I would come home from work, I always had to drive either over that pothole, or I would have to fight someone in the lane next to me to get over so I wouldn't have to go through it. And for a long time, I always wondered, why doesn't the city just fix this thing? It's affecting everybody. I've seen people nearly get into accidents because of it. Why won't anyone do anything about it? And I just looked up, after almost getting into an accident actually because of it. I went home and I just Googled like how to report a pothole in my town. And it turns out that literally it's a 5-minute process. You just call like the city, I think like the sanitation department or something. You just call them and they will say, okay, well, on this date and at this time, we'll send out a crew to fill in the hole. And I was like, okay, whatever. I did it, and I called the number, went through the whole process. I didn't think anything would really come of it. And then just last week, actually, I was driving back from work and I was getting ready to do my daily swerve over into the other lane, and the hole was filled. And I was like, there's no way they actually did it like that fast. And what I kind of took away from that whole experience was that I almost certainly wasn't the only person who thought this was an issue and this was an obstacle that needed to be dealt with. But I was the first person to bring it up. And that's something that's really important to mention. To you, whatever issue you might be thinking of, maybe it's not a deal breaker. Maybe it's not the absolute worst thing in the world. But I can say for those people that definitely almost got into accidents because of that pothole, that was a big issue to them. But just no one thought to speak up about it. And it only took one voice. Now, I can't guarantee that I was the only person that thought about it, and I was the only person that solved the problem. But it is good to always remember that for many issues, all it takes is one person to make the issue known. There's tons of things that we go through, that we walk past, that we see in our day-to-day lives. And all it takes is one person speaking up and saying, what are we doing to fix that? And if you can get the confidence to do that, which might not come immediately, but if you can get the confidence to do that, to raise your voice about that, you'll find that not only will it be a confidence booster for you and it'll help your self-esteem, it serves as inspiration to those around you. And that's something that I don't think the feeling that comes from that can be replicated anywhere else. So always remember to speak up, share your mind, even if it might not be a popular opinion. If you think it's the right thing to say, just say it.
Yeah, that's a great example, Jeremy, too. And thank you, too, for joining me today. We had a great conversation. And for those of you that are in Rhode Island that would like to learn more about self-advocacy, I'll leave the link that RIPIN has for the resources. And you can always email this podcast. The email will be in the description. And contact RIPIN at info@ripin.org, and we can always help you out. Thank you all for watching today or listening.